But first, Kamala can't and won't. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Today, Vice President Harris traveled to Texas to check the border box and play a game of make-believe.
It is important to be clear. It is working to build a fair and a functional and a humane immigration system. We feel very strongly about that. And as you know, we inherited a tough situation. And in 5 months, we've made progress. But there's still much more work to be done. But we've made progress.
Progress? Lies and more lies. Number one, she and Biden were not handed a tough situation on the border. They created a disaster on the border. They did. Thanks to Trump's Remain in Mexico policy and, of course, aggressive interior enforcement, illegal border crossings were driven way down under Trump. And number two, by progress, she means a total abdication, because most Americans define progress at the border as a reduction in the number of illegal crossers. But for Biden and Harris, I guess it's kind of right. Progress means an increase in crossings, regardless of the harm and cost to the American people. Now, I like to call this open borders collusion at the highest levels of our government. The Biden administration is committing an ongoing crime against our basic sovereignty, a conspiracy to undermine the rule of law, and their refusal to do what works to stem the flow of humanity into America. Now, this fiscal year alone, Border Patrol has intercepted nearly 1 million migrant crossers at our southern border. We don't even know how many of them have been released either into the interior part of the country. But you know that number has to be staggering. If Harris were a serious person who actually put America's interests first, she would have traveled to where the action is, in the Rio Grande Valley. But of course, that would have been too embarrassing and revealing. Because there, the border arrests stand at a whopping 271,000 and counting this fiscal year. So, of course, Kamala Harris decided to skip that region and instead visit El Paso, which has 2.5 times fewer border arrests and, just for good measure, a Democrat mayor. Now, everything I saw today was border theater from beginning to end. There's nothing serious about enforcement, and she was always in search of mythic root causes.
The work that we have to do is the work of addressing the cause, the root causes. I'm very excited about the potential, as we have talked with these congressional leaders and with the Secretary, the focus that we have placed on the root causes. You can't just react to a problem without solving it at its roots.
Now, everyone knows that root causes is just Washington's way of saying we have no intention of solving the problem. And despite the gravity of all of this, Harris was only on site for about 6 hours in Texas. And much of that time was spent glad-handing at the illegal crossing hotspot known as the El Paso International Airport. Now, of course, the Veep spun a totally fictional version of events today.
How did you decide that right now was the right time to make your first trip to the border?
Well, it's not my first trip. I've been to the border many times.
As the person in charge of the response.
I said back in March I was going to come to the border, so this is not a new plan.
If her dissembling weren't so infuriating, it would be absolutely hilarious. Because with so much time having passed, the vice president's border jaunt is kind of just a sideshow at this point. It's a distraction from the real story. Because while she embarrasses herself in El Paso, the Biden DHS is moving full steam ahead on dismantling our border protections and immigration system. Just days ago, they notified Congress that they were going to release tens of thousands of illegals into the interior of the country who were previously denied entry under the Remain in Mexico program. So they're going to pluck them out of Mexico, bring them back, and release them. Isn't that nice? That's not all. Just today, Biden's team is furiously trying to figure out how to rescind a Trump-era policy that allows for the immediate rejection of illegal border crossers due to COVID, because they care so much about COVID. This outrage aligns perfectly with something Harris said today about what our obligations are as a country.
That we have a responsibility, and if we ignore that responsibility, it will visit itself upon us in a very domestic way.
She was talking there about the region, Central America and Mexico. So apparently our responsibility is to other countries, Thus, not only will the middle class and all Americans, frankly, be hit with a higher cost of living because of inflation now, but you can also expect wages to stagnate as well. All because Biden bowed to the business lobby and the far left, of course. And they are fine with having a glut of workers because a glut of workers in the United States keeps wages flat, certainly keeps them from rising. So once again, we see the ugly truth about today's Democrats. Although Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border issue, she not only can't do it because she's in way over her head, she won't do it because shutting down illegal border crossers means putting America first. And why should they ever want to put a systematically racist country first? That doesn't make any sense. They don't think it's their responsibility to try to lift your standard of living or ensure your schools are functional or to make sure your streets are safe. Because if they did, they would do whatever it took to secure that southern border. And instead, their goal is to fundamentally transform our nation and its culture. So those borders, you bet, keep them wide open. They're only going to care about the border, about enforcement, when they see that their actions, or in this case inaction, has really cost them votes. And very soon, it will be time to make them pay. And that's the angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.